SUVs are what a lot of people are buying these days, and in Australia that trend spans across all size categories, including the now bustling small SUV segment. Over the past few days, rain, hail or shine, we've put three of the most important players in this segment up against each other to help you figure out which is the best small SUV. We've set ourselves a price target of 25 grand for each of these models, and they're all petrol powered and automatic. And because that's what people are buying, they're all front wheel drive. Our contenders are the Hyundai Kona Active, the Mazda CX-3 Max Sport, and the Honda HR-V VTI. All three of these SUVs have been updated recently, and in this test we'll assess each of them for their practicality, safety, value for money, and of course, how they drive. Let's get started. First up, let's take a look at the practicality on offer. Each of these small SUVs has 5 doors and 5 seats, but there are some marked differences in how useful each is. We attempted to fit the same stuff in each of these three vehicles, the CarsGuide pram and some suitcases. If you're buying a small SUV, you expect good practicality, and this test offered a good indication of where each of these models stacks up in terms of family friendliness. Yes, you can fit a pram in the Mazda CX-3 and the Hyundai Kona, but that's about it. There's not much space in the boots of either of these small SUVs if you have kids. But the Honda HR-V, on the other hand, has heaps of room. We've got a pram, we've got 2 suitcases, and there's actually room for more. It's really impressive. If you do have kids, all 3 models have ISOFIX child seat anchor points and 3 top tether points. Annoyingly though, the Honda has a ceiling mount centre belt and top tether point. But it takes practicality a step further with its clever rear seat system. The so-called magic seats in the HR-V are superb if you need something that offers terrific cabin practicality. Under the boot of all 3 of these models is a space saver spare wheel. Now, what about rear seat space for people? To give you an idea, I'm 6 feet tall, or 182 centimetres in the new money, and the driver's seat was set for me in each of these cars. None have rear air vents, which is a bit disappointing. The back seat space in the Honda is next level. I've got heaps of knee room back here. It's almost like a limousine. But it does have some things that aren't so kid-friendly, like this fabric finish on the doors. While it feels nice, and as an adult I can appreciate that, as a kid I might just get chocolate or yogurt or vomit all over it. Not the best idea. The Mazda CX-3's back seat is very cushy, but it does lack support for adult occupants when you're going through corners. It is very tight back here as well. I've got bugger all space in front of my knees. Although headroom is good, the width of the cabin isn't, because you could barely fit 3 across here. There's a big central tunnel, and these doors are actually quite bulky. They eat into shoulder space when you do try and fit 3 across. At the very least, you do get a center armrest with cup holders. It's just a bit useless when you do have cups or bottles in there. The Hyundai is the middle ground when it comes to back seat space, with a little bit more leg room than the CX-3, but pretty good headroom and decent shoulder room as well. The seats are a bit firmer and more supportive, but this high belt line means that little ones might struggle to see out over the top and get a good view. You do get a center armrest with a pair of cup holders, but there are no map pockets. The others get one each. Let's take a look at some of the features up front, starting with the media screens. Every one of these cars has a touchscreen media system with Bluetooth phone and audio streaming and USB connectivity. Plus, all 3 have sat-nav, but there are some differences in terms of the usability. The Mazda is the only one with a rotary dial to control the screen, which is handy, but the system can be hard to navigate, and the screen looks tiny too. The Honda's system is pretty poor by today's standards. The graphics are almost 90s-like, and there's not a lot of intuitiveness to the menus. The Hyundai screen is as close to perfect as you can get in this segment, with the best clarity, graphics, and the benchmark smartphone connectivity of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which the others don't get. The reversing camera of the Hyundai is also better than the other 2. let's take a closer look at each individual cabin. The Hyundai is quite plain in terms of its interior design, which is a bit of a shame considering it's so extroverted on the outside. Loose item storage throughout the cabin of the Kona is pretty good, and there are no gripes in terms of usability of the space. Mostly the materials give away that you're not in an expensive SUV. There are a lot of hard plastics throughout this cabin, but it's the only one of this trio to come with a digital speedo in front of the driver. While you might struggle to deal with the exterior styling of the Kona, the interior is definitely inoffensive, but is it too safe? The Honda is almost as plain as the Hyundai, but at least it gets a little bit of soft material on the dashboard if you can look past that fake stitching. It also gets digital climate control where the other two cars have knobs to control their aircon. And it's got the typical Honda practicality throughout. There's a pair of deep cup or bottle holders between the seats, and there's a shelf that runs underneath this bridged center console, and it really makes the most of not much space very well. It's a shame the USB port for the media system is up actually on the screen. It's a real pain to get to, and it also, well, it looks really messy just having a cable dangling like that. The Mazda steps things up in terms of cabin presentation, offering a bit more visual pizzazz than its competitors. The materials look better at a glance and they feel pretty good too, and it feels plush in here in general, which is important considering all three of these are priced pretty closely. But if you're like me, you mightn't want to look too closely at the fonts used because there's not a lot of continuity. I've noticed about 5 just in front of me on the steering wheel and the dashboard. However, items like push-button start and the decent amount of storage throughout the cabin of the front of the CX-3 do make up for some of its other shortfalls. As you've seen, all three vehicles have a reversing camera, and the Mazda and Hyundai have rear parking sensors too. The Honda doesn't. All three have 6 airbags. Each of these cars has the maximum 5-star NCAP safety rating, but none has been tested under the most strict modern criteria. The Kona was tested in 2017, the other two in 2015. The Kona is the only one here though that doesn't come with AEB as standard. You can option it, but it'll cost you. You'll have to read the full story for all the details. At the time of testing, this is the list pricing for each of these models. Remember, that's the price before on-road costs, and you could find even better drive-away deals if you're willing to shop around. Make sure you read the full review for every little detail. Now let's talk drivetrains. All of these small SUVs are front-wheel drive, so anything more than gravel tracks will be pretty much out of the question. The Honda has the smallest engine of this trio and the least power and torque too, but with a reworked CVT automatic, it's a little zestier than before. Claim consumption for all three is close, but in our real-world testing, including a mix of highway, urban and country driving, all three were a bit over their claims. Even so, the Mazda was best, and it's the only one with engine stop-start technology. Now, driving. If you like to have fun behind the wheel, then the pick of these three SUVs is the Hyundai Kona. It feels the peppiest of this trio despite being the heaviest, with pretty good engine response. And Hyundai's local engineers have done a really good job of tuning the chassis to make it fun to drive. It has super direct steering and it feels really agile, almost like it's on its tippy toes. But the steering does have a really artificial feel to it, which means it's hard to judge at times what's going to happen at the front end. And it's also very heavy. Doesn't matter which drive mode you have, there's too much weight to the steering, and I don't necessarily want to be arm wrestling a steering wheel in comfort mode. Also, the suspension is on the firm side. I guess it's got to be aggro because it's got to match up to the look, but if you're in the back seat, it's uncomfortable and pretty much unpleasant. The Mazda CX-3 sells on style, but it also sells on a thing the brand calls zoom zoom. So it's not surprising that it has real, natural feeling steering, and it's pretty involving to drive. Plus, the engine and gearbox want to play hard. They'll rev harder and allow you to explore the rev range more than the other two SUVs here. And the driving position is almost like a sports car. You can get yourself down nice and low, and I guess that's not the point of an SUV, but it does feel more like a hatchback in that regard. But there are some other elements to the drive experience which aren't as enjoyable. The suspension is very sharp, especially over hard edges. As fellow tester Richard Berry put it, it feels quite loose underneath you. And this car is almost brand new with hardly any kilometers on it, but it feels like it's got plenty. It's also the noisiest of these three, despite Mazda's apparently constant work to improve that. Well, it seems they need to work harder on it. Comfortable and brilliantly inoffensive. Compared to the other two SUVs here, the HR-V just feels like it makes less of a fuss of things. That might appeal to you, or it might not, but it's an undeniable trait that the Honda HR-V makes you forget about your surroundings, which is probably a good thing. The suspension is the most supple of these three, whether you're in town or out on the open road like we are now, and that's whether you're in the driver's seat, the passenger seat, or in the back. It's just a really nice place to be. And while the steering is a bit slower than the other two cars here, which means it can take just a little bit more effort to park, it is at least consistent in the way that it feels in your hands. Sure, the engine and CVT might not light many people's fires, and it's definitely the slowest of these three cars, but with one person or five on board, it does the job pretty well, better than you'd think. Each of these SUVs will undoubtedly appeal to different buyers. If you value safety and style, the Mazda CX-3 Max Sport could well be for you. It is for many people. The Hyundai Kona Active is definitely the most aggressive of this trio, the sportiest and the most fun to drive, but it does suffer some compromise as a result. But our winner is the Honda HR-V VTI, which is the correct choice for buyers who need practicality and space, and who also value comfort just as much as convenience. Did we get it right? Let us know in the comments section below. And also don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel to keep up to date with all our latest reviews and comparisons.